Hi, my name is Shoma Jergensen. I'm a business owner and instructor, and today I am going over the next installment in performing an external analysis for your strategic planning. And I want to talk about specifically using the tool Porter's 5 Forces as an instrument for competitive analysis. This is not a simple concept, certainly, but I do my best to hit the key concepts so that you can start getting used to the tool and using it right away. What is Porter's 5 Forces? Essentially, it's a comprehensive process for a competitive analysis. It is a bit more of a resource view. It does take into account what is out in the industry, the costs, and how people deal with them. And the main purpose is to determine competitive intensity, or how intense is competition in your industry. Now, this is important because high competitive intensity, or a whole lot of competitors and products and services with which to compete, creates what has been called a red ocean. Imagine sharks fighting over the consumer, and you get that idea of why the ocean would be churning in red. And red oceans decrease an organization's ability to make profit. So it's really important to understand how intense or red your ocean is competitively, or are you looking at your competitive industry as an overview and trying to determine where the blue ocean is, where there are fewer competitors, and how do you play in that water that allows you more flexibility to make more profit? So what makes up competitive intensity? According to Porter, there are 8 factors. First is simply lots of competitors. Are there a lot of people opening that type of business? I'm going to use a coffee shop as an example. My students in my Introduction to Business course every other quarter will create a business plan for a coffee shop, and we talk about the intensity of the competition to create that type of business and have it be viable. And industry growth is another factor. So is this a very quickly growing industry, as the dot-com industry was for some time before it self-corrected, or is it a slower growth industry? And if it is a slow growth industry with many competitors, you can see how your competitive intensity might increase. Third, are there high fixed and storage costs? If so, the competitors that are in the industry will fight to stay in it. And so that fight creates that red ocean churn. Is there a lack of differentiation? So although a lot of money is spent on marketing and branding, is there really not that much differentiation between the businesses? Again, the coffee shop is an example. Next, is there capacity added in large increments? An example that's often given is cruise ships. You can't add a room or two for a cruise ship or a hotel. Typically, when you add volume in that industry, you're adding a lot of capacity. If so, again, the competition for the number of consumers that can fill those spots is intense. And are those businesses using a wide range of competitive strategies? If so, it's very difficult to forecast or understand what steps might be around you so that you can counteract, contingency plan, or replan to navigate the waters. Is it a high stakes industry for CEOs or for the industry itself? An example of an industry that is increasing is high efficiency types of industries, windows, cars. There's a lot of high stakes involved, both culturally in the United States and for the safety and longevity of our planet. So it's a difficult industry to exit once you're there because you really want to make it work. And finally, are there high exit barriers? Once in, is it difficult for the competitor to get out? Are there highly specialized products or capital that's used in the creation of products and services that's difficult to liquidate? If so, you're going to be much less likely to exit the industry, whether you're doing well or not. All of these factors can create that red ocean type of industry, which does decrease profits. So what you're trying to do is find a strategic group or category of competitors that allow you to really focus less on what you provide and more on what your customers want. And are people providing it or not? A great example of this is Nintendo's Wii. For the longest time, the gaming industry was dominated by people who knew how to use the complicated controllers and really didn't appeal to people, women, people of more mature age who just wanted something simple. And they wanted to be able to play the way they've always been able to play other things like tennis or bowling. And along comes Wii that makes it very easy. Gamers who never even thought of playing video games are suddenly playing in groups and as parties. That's considered a blue ocean area for Nintendo. So where's the gap? And we're not going to go into those 6 principles that are put forth by Blue Ocean Strategy that increase profits. But if you're interested, this idea of blue ocean and finding the blue ocean has become more commonplace in business language. And here you'll see the website that you can visit to learn more about the strategy in the books. But it has become tremendously popular and again entered the common vernacular of business strategy and planning. So let's go back to thinking about Porter's 5 forces then, where essentially what you're trying to do is understand how competitively intense your industry is. So you would start with those 8 factors and go down one after the other and assess your industry based on those 8 factors. Okay, and each one may pose a threat or an opportunity. Now, you may be able to start brand new, and in that case, you can make some decisions based on the market in which you play. However, if you're inheriting an industry, you have to make some other kinds of decisions. And the first step in making those decisions is understanding how the industry is currently structured. So let's look at this first of the 5 forces. So it's actually the second of the 5 forces. First is the competitive intensity. Second is how easy is it for a company to get into your industry. So there are multiple factors involved in how easy it is to enter an industry. So is it expensive to get in? Do you have to have large economies of scale, or are there any barriers to entering that market that have high costs? Are you coming in as a relatively unknown player? If so, you're going to have to spend a lot of money establishing your name and your brand. And even once you do, are customers going to be willing to switch over? Are they so used to using the product or service that they currently have? For example, between Mac and PC, I'll often tell people I'm a PC. I would have a real hard time retraining myself to use a Mac. Is there a large capital barrier? Are there particular specialized capital and equipment that you would need to get into the industry? The auto industry is one of these. Or do you need a strong distribution channel that you don't have access to? That's often the case in the food industry. And what about policies? There are some industries I'll use, for example, opening a nursing school. There's not a lot of new nursing schools opening. Why? Because the credentialing that's necessary, the certifications, the accreditation stages can be a very high barrier to entry. And so there are fewer nursing schools. Therefore, those competitors that are willing to spend money on that element in the upfront find themselves with fewer competitors for nursing students. Right? Let's look at the next of the 5 forces, force number 3, bargaining power of buyers. Right? In this case, when we say buyers, we mean customers or consumers. Right? right? And the way that I think of this force is it a buyer's market or a seller's market? So let's use the real estate market as an analogy, all right? Are there so many buyers and limited supply that a buyer can make demands and really negotiate down prices? Or are there fewer buyers and so much needed and demanded, or limited demanded and needed inventory, that the seller has more power? They can set a price, they can negotiate terms that work best for the seller. So these are the types of questions you want to ask as you understand how competitive the industry is. So if it's an industry where the buyer has more power, that makes you as the organization have to work harder for their business. And so the competitiveness, the intensity is higher. If it's more of a seller's market, then you are, as the seller, able to better direct that relationship. So we've talked about threat of new entrants and the bargaining power of buyers. Let's look at the threat of substitutes. All right, in this case, can you get what you need from another industry? That's the main question. Okay. If you need tires for your car, you need tires for your car. There are only a certain number of suppliers of tires, but you can't use something other than tires. Right? However, if you are thirsty and that's the need you're trying to meet, you can drink water, you can drink soda, coffee, tea, sports drinks. There's a lot of different substitutes. One example I like to use, particularly in cold weather areas, is the idea of threat of substitutes for things like theaters and movies and plays and orchestras. In the summer, the substitute is to be outside and go on picnics and go to the lake. It's a very different view of what your substitute is for your entertainment. Often one entertainment entity will think they're competing only with another entertainment entity, but in cold weather areas in the summer, you're competing purely with the joy of being outside by a lake or by the ocean, and you end up competing more heavily for the few consumers who decide to spend some of their time inside. So let's look at bargaining power of suppliers. Right? This goes a little bit with that task environment in the previous video. So as you look at the bargaining power of suppliers, when suppliers have a high bargaining power, you are competing more heavily because your intensity increases for your organization because you're spending more money, therefore profits are decreasing, right? And so this is the resources your providers have. If they're scarce, if the supply of something that you need becomes more scarce, your costs go up. It includes labor supply. Okay, so if you're looking to hire nurses, there are not a lot of nursing schools and there are a shortage of nurses, then those schools supplying nursing candidates have higher power in that bargaining process. And then there's concentration. So how many suppliers of that good or service that you need exists? Are there substitutes? If you don't use powdered milk in your product, could you use a different type of raw material? If not, if you have to have powdered milk, for example, in Ovaltine, well, then how many suppliers provide powdered milk if there's not a good substitute? Right? Another idea in this bargaining power of suppliers is what share of their business do you have? For example, if you are one of their very important customers, if they have all their eggs in your basket, you have tremendous bargaining power. However, if you are a very small customer for that supplier, you lose that bargaining power, and that impacts your competitive intensity. And finally, can they do what you do? I know that sounds strange, but if there is an organization that is supplying you with everything you need to create a good or service, and with some integration, they could provide that good or service and enter the industry and compete with you, that increases their bargaining power with you. So all of these factors together, these 5 factors, the competitive intensity, threat of new entrants, bargaining power of buyers, threat of substitutes, and bargaining power of suppliers, all provides the input or the information as you're scanning your competitive environment. But as we learned in the previous video, scanning is not the same as analysis. So what do we do with this information once we have it? Well, a table works really well once again. So as you look at the particular force of the 5 forces, you might start with intensity. Now this is an abbreviated table. I don't have them all in here. But how many competitors are there in your industry? Is it a high number posing a threat? If so, how do they pose a threat? If it's a small number and it creates and opens up an opportunity, how is it an opportunity? And define the industry you're talking about, all right? Is the industry growing quickly or slowly? Is that a threat or an opportunity for your company? It's potential of entrance. Are there cost advantages, or is it easy to enter the market? Are there cost disadvantages? Is it difficult, or are there high barriers to entry? Does that pose a threat or an opportunity? If you're trying to enter the market and there are cost disadvantages, that's a threat to you. If you're already in the industry and there are cost disadvantages, that's an opportunity because there are fewer competitors that would enter. And then you would go down power of buyers, substitutes, power of suppliers. Okay, so again, a tool to bring your scanning to analysis. Now I want to close my discussion of the external environment scan and analysis, not just Porter's 5 forces, but the previous video on your external environment, just with some challenges as you scan your external environment. First of all, the environment changes rapidly. Don't lull yourself into, well, I did an external environment analysis a few years ago, because things change too quickly. Really, a yearly environmental scan will just barely keep you on top of changes. So that can be time consuming, depending on the depth with which you conduct your analysis. You might do a deep dive once every couple of years, but on a quarterly basis, look for any major changes in the environment. And finally, you can get inaccurate forecasts. A major competitor might come out and talk about, they're going to enter the market with 6 new products and brands, and they might not make it. Or they might talk about entering with 3 new products, and they might be able to, with acquisitions, come in with 6. You can't anticipate all those changes, so you're constantly having to keep an eye to what's happening in the external environment. Well, thank you so much for your time watching this video, and I look forward to talking about the internal environment in the next couple of video lectures. Thank you.